Thank you for joining us on this edition of The List. On the first day of Cybersecurity Awareness Month and on this edition of The List, we'll drill down the details of the impending executive order on cybersecurity by President Barack Obama. On the show to give us his perspective on what is truth and what is tale about the current administration's cyber executive order is Bob Dix, Vice President of Government Affairs and Critical Infrastructure Protection at Juniper Networks. And Bob, welcome to the program.
It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, thanks for being back, Bob. We're talking today about President Barack Obama's impending executive order on a cyber bill, or cyber regulations for that matter. We'd like to do a little show here called Truth or Tale on the list. And let's start with number one on that list. Truth or Tale, Bob, an executive order that takes care of the critical infrastructure issues could open the door to a bill focused solely on information sharing or liability protection. Bob, truth or tale?
Tale. But let me just caveat that I haven't yet seen a copy of the proposed or pending executive order. I'm relying much on what I have read in the media to come to these conclusions. And in this particular case, I find interesting the operative words takes care of critical infrastructure. I'm not sure that there's any executive order or even any legislation that could take care of critical infrastructure. But having said that, what I worry about is that this approach may in fact create a wider chasm in the willingness of people to come to the table and find compromise. So information sharing, building situational awareness, including liability protection as an important element of that, need to be a part of that discussion, but I'm not sure any executive order moves us in a positive direction.
Well, Bob, number two on our list, the administration insists on creating boxes dictating how industry addresses cybersecurity threats when what we really need is flexibility. Truth or tale, Bob?
So truth. We need to be sure that whatever we do from a public policy perspective protects the investment opportunities in the private sector in research and development that's delivering the innovation and the solutions that increase our opportunity to meet this challenge and to be able to manage the risk that we are confronted with in cyberspace.
Number three on the list, the executive order focuses solely on cybersecurity for critical infrastructure. Truth or tale?
I'm going to say tale on this because it would appear, again, based on press accounts and correspondence that has been quoted, that there would be a broader impact on critical infrastructure owners and operators beyond just cybersecurity. So I'm very interested in seeing the details, but for now I'm going to have to say tale.
And number four on the list, Bob, the main thrust of the executive order is to direct federal agencies to develop voluntary cybersecurity guidelines for critical infrastructure. Bob, truth or tale?
Tale. I've seen no evidence that there's any intention by those that are advocating, at least in the Senate Bill 3414 and the administration's legislative proposal, for anything to be particularly voluntary. They may call it that, but I don't believe that for a second, is why I call it tale. And I think I need to take the moment now to just reiterate a view from many in the private sector, if not all, is that a regulatory and compliance approach to addressing the cybersecurity challenge is likely to move the needle backwards. Let me say why. We have clear and compelling evidence that the time that it would take to build such a program, the time it would take to implement such a program, by that time, virtually all of it would be obsolete. Folks need to realize that cybersecurity is a very dynamic issue, a very dynamic challenge. The bad guys are changing their tactics and techniques regularly. It's important for those of us that are in the business of protecting networks and protecting the infrastructure to be able to be fast, nimble, and agile. Anything that says regulatory or compliance related to it is anything but.
Now, I was just watching a recent interview with the chairman of the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, Senator Joseph Lieberman. He was talking about encouraging the current administration and suggesting, for that matter, that these individual agencies that oversee the smart grid, the electric grid, and the finance sector and so forth would actually take on these voluntary standards and make them mandatory. How close are we to that happening?